My biggest problem with these Disney remakes is that those old iconic songs get stuck in my head all over again, and I have a hard enough time finding some sleep at night as it is. Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage and I'm happy I'm finally able to talk about a new movie without caring too much about possible spoilers. But just in case, be prepared that I assume everybody has seen the original Disney animated classic from 1994 that was loosely based on William Shakespeare's Hamlet. This new version was directed by Jon Favreau, and for the most part it is a scene-by-scene remake that oftentimes even recreates exact shots from the original. There are changes and some additions that I will talk about later, but it's mostly exactly the story and the characters that you know and love. And that's not a bad thing, because the animation technology is so different. I almost never really mind remakes, because I think it's totally legit to tell stories again and again for new generations or even the same with different angles and ideas. If it turns out great, you might end up with another film to cherish. If not, you will always have the original anyway. With Disney's recent reimaginations of their classic animated movies, it's always hit and miss for me. But I just really enjoyed Guy Ritchie's version of Aladdin. Since I also like Jon Favreau's 2016 The Jungle Book, I was looking forward very much to see what he would do with The Lion King. Both The Jungle Book and The Lion King are often called live-action remakes, and while you had at least one real human actor in front of the camera in The Jungle Book, The Lion King is actually a complete animated movie, because using photorealistic computer-generated animation doesn't make something live-action. Now all that being said, let's cut to the chase. Overall, I thought this new version of The Lion King was fine. From a technical standpoint, it's downright fantastic. These are easily the most impressively realistic animals and landscapes ever put on film. We are at the point where we can pretty much digitally create any image imaginable, and with the right team and enough money behind it, it will look as real as the real thing. The film opens up with an almost frame-by-frame, focus shift by focus shift recreation of the Circle of Life introduction from the original. And I have to say that it got me. I was in awe of what the team of visual artists did accomplish here, and since the film uses the same great score by Zimmer and the same succession of images, it still establishes a great world and a great sense of wonder, of animal life, of community, and of what's to come in the next 2 hours. The Lion King. As in the animated movie, we then see a little mouse that gets captured by the villainous lion Scar. This is the first of many moments that are a little bit expanded. Instead of the mouse instantly getting caught, we follow her closely on its way through some landscape until it arrives at Scar's lair. The way that mouse is moving looks incredible. Disney always had a long tradition of studying animal life to bring out the right movements, the right nuances in their animated versions. And it's the same here, but in a completely realistic manner. But their heavy emphasis on realism has heavy downsides as well. I'm sure different people will react differently to this, but at least for me this experiment, if you want to call it that, didn't fully work. Because it didn't strengthen the story or give it more emotional resonance. Quite the opposite. In wanting to be as realistic as possible, I think they sacrifice a lot of what makes animation such a great medium for storytelling. That doesn't mean that the film as a whole was bad, it's still a fine film, because the story and characters are still there, and it has many great things going for it that I will talk about in a second. But before doing that, I think it's best to come right to the film's biggest problem. Once the whole Circle of Life sequence that fully relies on dialogue-free visual and musical storytelling, and once we witness the technical marvel and beauty of that lifelike observation of that little mouse, we are introduced to two characters, to Scar and to the bird Zazu, two talking characters. In The Jungle Book, it took me a second to get over the initial awkward feeling of seeing realistic animals talk. Here it wasn't so much an awkward feeling, but a constant frustration about the lacking ability of those CGI creatures to really emote. A lion and a bird don't have the facial expressions of a human being. They won't pull faces, they won't shed tears, make big eyes or smirky smiles. If you want to read their feelings, it is much more through their body language. But even that is much more limited. you won't see a lion doing dance moves. Of course, in an animated movie, that's no real obstacle. After all the animals were the same in the 1994 version. But this time it should be as realistic as possible. Maybe to demonstrate how advanced our technology has become, maybe also because you could easily step into the so-called uncanny valley, where something just looks outlandish. It's also important to realize that not all animals have the same ability to express something through their faces. What Andy Serkis and his team achieved with the character of Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes movies is incredible, but among monkey is way closer to a human being than a lion, and there was no motion capture involved in the making of The Lion King. I guess it will be very subjective how much emotions you are able to get out of the character animations, but I think it's a little bit telling that Disney showed no talking animal at all in the teaser and less than 2 full seconds in the trailer. This of course doesn't mean that the whole film is an emotionless affair. After all, you can create emotions through so much more than just facial expressions. The way the images are composed, how the music sets in, through the lyrics of the songs, and of course very much through all the voice acting. The Lion King features an impressive cast. Donald Glover as Simba, Beyoncé as Nala, John Oliver as Zazu, and Mufasa is once again voiced by the only returning actor, James Earl Jones, which instantly brings back some gravitas as well as nostalgia, of course. Unfortunately, I think James Earl Jones was as important in the original one as Jeremy Irons as Mufasa's evil brother Scar. He has such a recognizable and memorable voice, and his performance made Scar both bad to the bone as well as really charismatic and overall just fun to see and hear. In the new version, Scar is voiced by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and while he can be menacing, I found this interpretation a bit lacking. The approach isn't quite the same. The old version was more theatrical, more Shakespearean. The new one is maybe more brutal and darker, but overall it just felt more generic to me. This was of course also more emphasized by Scar's missing expressionistic facial expressions. And since this movie strives for realism, all the characters of one species look much more alike than in the old version, which made it sometimes hard to immediately distinguish, for example, the grown-up Nala from Simba's mother Sarabi. Now you could also confound them in the old movie, but that one had a distinct color design for all characters. But before anyone says something, I'm no idiot. I clearly recognize different little nuances in the new character designs, but something like a color is easier to process as, for example, some scars or wrinkles. Now the question is, why has it to be easy? And the answer is that in a movie like this you want your audience to feel exactly as you intend. You want to tell the story as clearly and as strongly as possible for the greatest effect. You want to transport the meaning, the emotions and the themes in the best way. And by making almost everything as realistic as possible, you are limiting your own means to do that. It's a self-imposed challenge, I guess, and the movie is still able to tell a very efficient story. I won't take that away at all. It is also adding some extra meat in the second half to Scar's cruel regime and to Nala's role in the story that overall enhances the experience. They also expand a bit on Simba's life with Timon and Pumbaa, which I think makes his struggle and the theme of responsibility stronger than in the original movie. But I couldn't help to feel a bit frustrated about the missed opportunity to make the story and the emotions as strong as they were before. There were big and small moments that aren't even close in their dramatic impact when you compare them next to one another. Small instances like the frightened Simba when his father is angry with him, and big moments like the beginning of the stampede where Simba's face is full of panic, or the crying Simba that just lost his father and thinks it was all his fault. The new version is certainly able to transport some of it, and it sure helps that the little lion cub is cute by default, but as hard as that may sound, oftentimes the movie reminded me of Zoolander because there were so little variations in the animal faces. As good as the voice acting is, there's also a constant barrier to what you see on screen. It feels as if you're watching a National Geographic program that also tries to tell you an iconic story by people talking from the off in a look who's talking now manner. But like I said earlier, it's not just the facial expressions. In their attempt to be as realistic as possible, they also strip away a lot of what makes film such a great medium for storytelling, and at the same time they made this strange compromise. They want to give you real animals, but I also want to be the Disney musical you all remember. And while the musical numbers probably still bring a smile to your face or make you move your feet to the beat, they were also my biggest disappointments. Normally, a musical is artificial and very expressive by default. In real life, people just don't break out into song and dance numbers. And normally, a musical leaves the real world behind to a certain degree whenever a song is starting. It is no longer bound to a realistic setting, but instead chooses to highlight certain actions and emotions, create some spectacle, drench a scene in different colors, make the inner feelings of our characters come out on the outside and so. When you look at the 1994 The Lion King, the animation is actually rather simple overall. It's beautiful and wonderfully designed, but there aren't endless details to be found. It looks quite different than a Ghibli movie of that time, for example. But simpler doesn't mean worse or less effective. It completely depends on how all elements are used. The new version is photorealistic with hundreds of details everywhere, and yet it never is as effective emotionally as the original. And I think in the song sequences this is shown best. I Just Wanna Be King turned the whole scenery into this colorful, abstract showcase of a young lion dreaming of his big future. The new movie isn't bold enough to do any of that kind, and to oversimplify it a little bit, it more or less turns all song and dance sequences into animals going for a walk while singing. Sure, those scenes have a lot of eye candy and impressive animal animations, but they totally lack any kind of artistically striking idea or symbolism. The original Be Prepared sequence used heavy fascism imagery, making it super dark and charged with meaning. For the new version, they originally intended to not do the song at all. I can't say if it were the disappointed messages of all the fans or another reason, but they decided to still include it. But since neither dancing nor marching animals fit the idea of realism, now it's just Scar walking up some stones while the hyenas look up to him, accompanied by not the best singer in the world. This might come across as a bit nitpicky, but the Can You Feel the Love Tonight scene doesn't even feature any kind of nighttime atmosphere. And when Simba is finally realizing what his responsibility is, and he's talking to the spirit of his father, the film won't even visualize his father's face in the clouds. Again, this is the approach they went with, but I simply don't think it's a particular interesting or strong one. And since this is still a musical and a movie about talking animals, it just felt a bit strange to me. But because I want to end this review on a more positive note, I have to say that Timon and Pumbaa, now voiced by Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen, were a definite highlight of the film. The humor works really well. It's part what you already know from the original and part new dialogue, and of course their new interpretation adds something fresh as well. The movie also slightly expanded the whole world of Timon and Pumbaa and added some other animal characters that can be seen for a few seconds. The Lion Sleeps Tonight scene almost becomes its own full song and dance number, and I really enjoyed it. So in German I'd say, der König der Löwen ist so nah am Original, dass er automatisch ein ganz guter Film ist. Doch sein Realismus-Anspruch macht ihn zwar auf der einen Seite zu einer wirklich eindrucksvollen Augenweide, nimmt ihm auf der anderen Seite aber auch vieles von seiner Ausdruckskraft. I give The Lion King 6 out of 10. It's more like 6.4, but I don't do that. Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about The Lion King. You can hit me up on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram simply at The Jimmy Cage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.